When information comes from military personnel, we often say it confidently that it should never be taken for granted or ignored, because such information is usually highly confidential. When it is shared, it can be seen as an act of God's mercy, so that those destined to escape what is coming will not become victims when it happens soon. This is such content, and we encourage you to watch to the end. Quickly tell us where you are watching from, so that our team can pray with you and your family. I will begin sharing today's experience. My name is Dorothy Phillip. I have served my country for 11 years. 11 years of discipline, of duty, of putting my life on the line so that others could be safe. 3 weeks ago, I was discharged from the hospital. When I got home, all I wanted was rest. I never want to talk about my encounter and the things Jesus showed me. All I wanted was complete and total rest. My body was weak. My mind was tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. I just wanted to lie in my bed, to be quiet, to forget what had happened to me for a little while. Think about it. I especially did not want to tell anyone what I had experienced, because even to me, it sounded impossible. It sounded like the kind of thing that would make people look at me differently, and after everything I had already been through, I just couldn't handle that. But then the encounters started. Different ones all the time, each one pushing me, telling me to speak, voices that were not my own thoughts. Feelings that would come over me so strong that I would have to stop whatever I was doing, and every single encounter pointed to the same thing. I needed to tell people what God revealed to me when I died, when I went to heaven, when I lost my baby. So here I am, taking a deep breath, opening my mouth to tell you something that terrifies me and gives me hope, all at the same time in male form. Please be patient with me. Still in my recovery process. 2 months before everything happened, I found out I was pregnant. I remember the exact moment. I was at work, in the military compound, and I had been feeling different for a few days, tired in a way that didn't make sense. My body felt strange, not quite like myself. I went to the medical clinic during my break, just to check. I didn't think it would be anything serious. I thought maybe I was just pushing myself too hard, staying up too late, not eating enough. That's what happens when you're a soldier. You push, and your body eventually tells you to stop. The doctor ran some tests. I sat in that small room waiting, thinking about all the things I had to do that day. Reports to file, meetings to attend, soldiers to oversee. And then the doctor came back with this small smile on her face. She told me I was pregnant. I was going to have a baby. I remember my heart stopping for just a moment. Not because I was unhappy, but because it was real. It was happening. In 9 months, everything would change. I had planned my life so carefully. My career had been first, always. But now there was going to be another person, another life that depended on me. I went back for another checkup a few weeks later. That's when they did the ultrasound and I could see the baby on the screen. So small, so perfect. The heartbeat was strong. Everything looked healthy. The doctor told me that the pregnancy was going well, that I was in good condition, that there was no reason to worry. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I was young enough. I was fit. I had no health problems. This was supposed to go smoothly. And here's the thing that still bothers me when I think about it. The pregnancy didn't slow me down at all. I know that might sound like I'm bragging, but I'm not. I'm trying to explain that I thought I was fine. I thought everything was fine. I still did my job. I still trained. I still carried out my duties exactly the way I always had. When my commanding officers asked if I needed to take it easy, I told them no. I felt good. I felt strong. I was going to be a mother and a soldier, and I was going to do both things well. Now I understand how foolish that was. But at the time, I really believed it. March 25th came around and it was a normal day, completely normal. I had finished my morning rounds and I needed to go to the administrative building. There were some reports I had to file before the end of the day. I walked across the compound like I had done 1,000 times before. The weather was nice. The sun was warm. I was thinking about what I would have for lunch. I climbed the steps to the building. There were maybe 10 or 12 steps. Easy steps. Steps I had climbed so many times that I wasn't even thinking about my feet anymore. I was thinking about something else entirely. About the reports. About the afternoon meetings. About whether the baby would be a boy or a girl. And then my foot caught on something. Or maybe I just missed the step. I don't even know exactly what happened. One moment I was walking up and the next moment my body was falling. I remember the feeling of losing my balance, that split second when you know something is wrong, but you can't do anything to stop it. I reached out, trying to grab something, trying to catch myself, but there was nothing there to hold on to. I fell forward and down, and my body came down hard on my side. I was shocked more than anything else. I was a trained soldier. I had been in dangerous situations. I had been trained to move, to react, to survive. But this was just a fall down some steps. I didn't hit my head. I didn't think anything was broken. I thought I could just get up. I tried to stand. I remember thinking it wasn't a direct hit on my stomach. Maybe everything was okay. Maybe the baby was protected somehow. I tried to push myself up with my hands. That's when everything went wrong. I couldn't move. I really couldn't move. It was like my body had stopped listening to my brain. The pain was like nothing I had ever felt before, not even in combat, not even when I was injured in training. It came from somewhere deep inside, spreading out from my belly, sharp and burning and so wrong. And everything was happening too fast. One second I was trying to stand up, and the next second I felt dizzy. The world started spinning. My vision got blurry. And before I could even understand what was happening, before I could call out or ask for help, I felt myself leaving my body. I was floating. The only way I can describe it. I was looking down, and I could see myself lying on the ground at the bottom of those steps. I could see officers running toward me. I could see them shouting, though I couldn't hear the words. They were turning me over carefully, checking me for injuries. One of them was already on the phone, calling for emergency services. 911, he was saying. There's been an accident. Officer down. I wasn't scared. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. I felt almost peaceful, watching this happen like it was happening to someone else. But then I felt something else, a kind of pulling sensation, but not like gravity pulling down. This was different. This was like being lifted by hands that I couldn't see. Hands that were strong and gentle at the same time. I felt my spirit being pulled upward and upward. There were forces around me, beings that I could sense but not quite see. They were moving with me, guiding me, taking me away from the military compound and away from my body lying on the ground. The movement was so fast, but it didn't feel frightening. It felt like being carried, like being held safe. The transition happened in an instant. One moment I was above the compound, and the next moment I was standing in a place that didn't exist in the normal world. It was a forest, but not like any forest I had ever seen. The trees were there, but they seemed to be made of light as much as wood. The ground beneath my feet felt solid and real, but it was also soft, like walking on grass that was alive. The air itself felt different. It was clean in a way that the world isn't clean. It smelled like something I could never quite describe, like being new. And then I saw the table, the 4 apples, a vision of what is coming. It appeared in front of me, just there, like it had always been there. On the table were 4 apples. I know that sounds strange. It sounds simple, but these were not normal apples. These apples were huge. Each one was about the size of a large ball, maybe the size of a basketball or bigger. I had never seen anything like them in my life. Not in nature, not in any place I had ever been. I stood there for a long moment, just staring at them. My mind was trying to make sense of what my eyes were seeing. In all my years, in all the places I had traveled, and all the things I had experienced, I had never seen fruit like this. These apples defied everything I knew about how the world worked. They were perfect in their shape, each one a complete sphere. They were so large that they would have been impossible to hold in 2 hands, and yet they sat there on the table as naturally as if they belonged there, as if they had always been there, waiting for me to see them. I remember thinking in that moment that I had to be dreaming. Nothing like this could be real. Apples did not grow this big. Apples did not exist in nature looking like this. This had to be some kind of vision or dream or hallucination brought on by whatever had happened to my body. But even as I thought these things, I knew they were not true. I knew with absolute certainty that I was awake. I knew that I was experiencing something real. I knew that what I was seeing was truth. The first apple was on the left side of the table. It was black, not dark red or dark green, but black. So black that it seemed to swallow the light around it. It looked wrong. It looked evil. Even though I know that sounds like a strange way to describe a piece of fruit. But that was my first feeling when I saw it. Revulsion, a sense that I should never, ever touch this apple. That to eat this apple would be a terrible mistake. If someone had asked me which one of these 4 apples I would never choose, it would have been that one. I would have chosen any of the others before that black apple. Any of them, even if I was dying of hunger, even if it was the only food available, even if eating it was the only way to survive. I would not have chosen that apple. The blackness of it was unlike any black I had ever seen before. It was not just a dark color. It was like looking into a void. It was like staring into nothingness itself. It was like all light went to die when it touched that apple. And yet there was something almost magnetic about it. My eyes kept being drawn to it, even though everything inside me wanted to look away. I could feel the wrongness coming from it. I could feel the danger emanating from it like heat from a fire. I could sense the death that was connected to that black apple. Just looking at it made my spirit recoil. Just being near it made my heart heavy. I was standing there, trying to understand what I was seeing, when a scene opened up in front of me. It was like a curtain being pulled back, or like I was watching television, except that it was happening all around me and I was inside it rather than looking at it from outside. The forest that I had been standing in seemed to fade away. The apples on the table remained, but now I could see beyond them, through them, and around them. I could see a vast field, and it was full of people. More people than I could count. Thousands and thousands of them, maybe millions. They were spread out across this ground, and they were doing their daily work. Some were walking, some were standing still, some were talking to each other, some were working at jobs, some were with their families. They were just living their lives, doing ordinary things. The people looked normal. They looked like people from my world, from my time. They were dressed in modern clothing. They were using phones and computers and other devices. I could see cars in the distance. I could see buildings. I could see the structures and systems of our civilization. But there was something different about this place. Something felt off about it. Something felt like it was not quite the world I knew. It was like a copy of my world. A version of my world. But not exactly my world, and every single one of them had the 4 apples with them. Either the apples were by their side, sitting next to them, or they were carrying them in bags or baskets or holding them in their hands. But all 4 apples were always there, always available to them. Each person had access to all 4. Each person could choose, and yet I had a terrible feeling that most of them would make the wrong choice. I had a sense of dread that filled my heart as I looked at all those people with all those choices in front of them. I was trying to understand what this meant when I noticed something happening. The people were beginning to eat, and they were all choosing the same apple. The black one, the one that looked so wrong and so terrible, the one that I would never have chosen. Every single person I could see was reaching for the black apple. It was like they had all decided at the same moment to eat it. It was like they were all being drawn to it in the same way. It was like the black apple was calling to them and they could not resist. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run down into that field and grab their hands and stop them. I was shouting, trying to warn them. I kept saying, "Don't eat that one. Please choose a different one. There are other apples. Don't you see them? Please, look at the other apples. I am begging you." But no one could hear me. No one even looked up. They just kept reaching for the black apple, taking bites, eating it like it was the most delicious thing they had ever tasted, like it was sweet and perfect and exactly what they had always wanted. They ate it like it was saving them, like it was the answer to everything. I watched in horror as person after person made the same choice. Families together ate the black apple, parents and children eating together. Children ate the black apple without hesitation. The elderly ate the black apple, their wrinkled hands reaching out without doubt. People who looked educated and smart and capable all ate the black apple. Doctors and lawyers and teachers and soldiers all made the same choice. No one seemed to question it. No one seemed to hesitate. They just took it and ate it, and I was powerless to stop them. I was voiceless. I was invisible. I was just a witness to a tragedy that I could not prevent. And then the horror began. Within 30 minutes, maybe less, I started to see them collapse. The people who had eaten the black apple began to fall to the ground. Their bodies just gave out. One moment they were standing there, satisfied, thinking that they had made the right choice. The next moment they were falling. And here's the thing that made this so terrifying, so impossible to understand. When they fell, they did not just die. They vanished. They disappeared completely, like they had never been there at all. One moment a person was standing there eating the apple, and the next moment they were gone, completely gone. There was nothing left of them. No body, no trace, no memory even seemed to remain that they had ever existed. I felt like I could not breathe. I felt like I was screaming, but no sound was coming out of my mouth. All those people, all of them choosing the black apple, and all of them vanishing, gone from the world, just like that, as if they had never been born, as if they had never lived, as if they had never mattered. They were simply erased from existence, deleted, removed. But the scene did not end. The field was still full of people, and they kept eating and they kept disappearing. It was like a loop, like a cycle that would not stop. More people would eat the apple, more people would collapse, more people would vanish, and the field just kept refilling with more people who made the same choice, over and over, endless, unending. A continuous stream of people making the same terrible decision and facing the same terrible fate. I could not understand it. How could so many people make the same terrible choice? How could they all see what was happening and still choose to eat that black apple? How could they not learn from what they were witnessing? How could they watch their neighbors disappear and then pick up the same fruit and eat it themselves? Then the focus shifted, and I was looking at the second apple on the table. This apple was the same size as the black one, huge, like a ball. But the color was different. It was not black, but it had a pattern on it that looked like a zebra, stripes of different colors running across the surface, black and white, and maybe some other colors mixed in, gray and purple and sickly shades that I did not have names for. It looked less evil than the black apple, but also less natural. It looked like something that had been changed, that had been corrupted, that was not what it was supposed to be. It looked like it might have once been good. But something had happened to it. Something had gone wrong. Something had poisoned it from the inside. Another scene opened up. This time I was looking at a different group of people, and they also had all 4 apples with them. But when they reached for the apples, they did not choose the black one. This time they were choosing the striped apple, the zebra apple. I felt a small moment of hope when I saw this. Maybe these people would be smarter. Maybe these people would be more careful. Maybe these people would make a better choice. Maybe they had learned from what had happened before. I watched as they ate it, and something different happened. They did not vanish right away like the people who ate the black apple. But they began to look sick. Their bodies grew weak. They moved more slowly. Their faces became pale. Their skin took on a grayish color. Some of them collapsed to the ground. But when they collapsed, they did not vanish. They just stayed there, lying on the ground, struggling to stand back up, trying, but unable to make their bodies obey them. Others managed to stay standing, but they were clearly suffering. Their faces showed pain and confusion and fear. Their hands were shaking. Their eyes were wide with the understanding that something was very wrong, that they had made a terrible mistake. And gradually, over time, they did fade away and disappear. But it took longer. Their suffering lasted. Days passed, weeks maybe. I watched as they grew weaker and weaker. I watched as they lost hope. I watched as their will to survive drained away along with their strength. And finally, when they had suffered enough, when they had paid their price in pain and fear and despair, they vanished just like the others. I realized that this apple was poison too, but it was a slower poison. It was a poison that made people suffer first, that made them weak and sick and afraid, before it finally took their lives. It was a poison that was almost worse than the first one, because at least with the black apple, the end came quickly. With this striped apple, people had to endure their pain. They had to watch their bodies betray them. They had to feel themselves getting weaker and weaker, knowing that the end was coming, but unable to stop it. The agony stretched out. The uncertainty continued. Death came slowly and with suffering. The third apple on the table looked almost beautiful compared to the first two. It looked good. It looked like something you would want to eat. It had color to it. It had a shine to it. It glowed with a kind of health that the other apples did not possess. It looked fresh. It looked clean. It looked healthy and delicious. If I had not seen the first two apples, I might have been tempted by this one. I might have thought it was good. It was deceptive in its appearance. It was beautiful, and yet it was dangerous. But there was something horrifying about it that I did not notice at first. The more I looked at it, the more I began to understand what was wrong with it. All around the apple, covering the table around it, were insects. Every kind of insect imaginable. Flies and spiders and beetles, and things that I did not even have names for. Wasps and hornets and creatures that looked like they had been designed in hell itself. They were crawling all over the place, swarming around this beautiful apple. The apple looked good on the outside, but it was surrounded by filth and disease and corruption. The more I looked at it, the more insects I could see. They were everywhere. They were moving and crawling and buzzing. They were feeding on something around the apple. They were attracted to it like it was the source of all their food, like it was the center of all their activity. The insects were not just near the apple. They were part of it. They were connected to it. They were its companions and its servants. Another scene opened. Another group of people. And they reached for the third apple. I wanted to warn them too. I wanted to tell them to look more carefully. I wanted them to see the insects. I wanted them to understand that something that looks good on the outside can be completely corrupted on the inside. I wanted them to know that beauty can hide ugliness, but like before, they could not hear me. They could not see me. I was just a witness to what was happening. I was powerless. When they ate it, something different happened again. They did not die, at least not right away, and they did not seem to be poisoned in the way the others were. But something happened to their minds. They changed. Their eyes went blank. Their faces went blank. Their expressions became empty. They started to move and act in ways that did not make sense. They started to do things that did not seem to come from their own choice. It was like their minds had been taken over, like something else was controlling them, like their bodies were being operated by remote control. They were like slaves, or like puppets on strings. They had no will of their own anymore. They could not think for themselves. They could not make decisions. They just moved and acted the way something else wanted them to move and act. I watched as parents who had eaten the apple hurt their own children without seeming to understand what they were doing. I watched them strike their children. I watched them speak cruel words, but their faces were blank. Their eyes were empty. It was like they were not really there anymore. Like the person they had been was gone. I watched as people who had loved each other turned on one another with cold cruelty. I watched as husbands and wives looked at each other with hatred. I watched as friends became enemies. I watched as people performed tasks that went against everything they had once believed in, and they did these things without question, without hesitation, without any sign that they understood what they were doing was wrong. I understood then that this apple was a different kind of poison. It was not a poison that killed the body. It was a poison that killed the mind. That took away everything that made a person. That stole their soul. It left them alive but dead inside. It made them into empty vessels that could be filled with whatever commands were given to them. It made them into tools to be used by someone else. And then I saw the fourth apple. It was so bright that I could barely look at it. It was shining so brightly that it hurt my eyes. The light was coming from inside it, like there was a light source inside the apple itself. It was glowing, radiant, brilliant beyond anything I had ever seen. It was almost too bright to see. It was so bright that it seemed to light up the entire table. It seemed to light up the entire forest. It seemed to light up everything around it. But at the same time, the brightness was not harsh or painful. It was beautiful. It was pure. It was clean. It was everything that the other three apples were not. It was good. It was true. It was real. But I felt drawn to it. Despite the brightness, I wanted to look at it. I wanted to understand what it was. And I was so afraid of what the scene would show me. I knew by now that each apple represented something coming. Each apple was a warning and a choice and a consequence. And the fourth apple, the brightest one, surely represented something that would be the most important of all. Something that would determine the fate of everyone. The fourth scene opened. People reached out and touched this fourth apple. Just touched it. They did not even have to eat it like they had to eat the others. Just putting their hands on it was enough. Just making contact with it. And the moment they did, they vanished. Not in the slow way that happened with the striped apple. Not in the way of the insect-covered apple, where they became slaves and lived on in emptiness. It was instant. Immediate. The moment they touched that bright apple, they were simply gone. They just disappeared. They were taken away. They were raptured away, taken to somewhere else, somewhere that I could not see, somewhere that was beyond this world, somewhere that was perfect and beautiful and safe. And I understood something at that moment. These people were the ones who had chosen wisely. These were the ones who had refused the first three apples. These were the ones who had known what was coming and who had prepared themselves. These were the ones who had built themselves up spiritually. These were the ones who had faith and hope and love and trust. And because they had made the right choices, because they had held fast to their beliefs, because they had endured through all the trials and tribulations that had come before, they were taken, they were rescued, they were saved, they were taken to safety and to glory and to eternal life with Jesus. I was standing there, trying to process what I had just witnessed, when I felt a presence so powerful, so overwhelming, so filled with love and authority and truth that I could not stand. I fell to my knees. I knew who it was before I even looked up. I knew that Jesus Christ was standing there with me in that forest place. I could feel his presence. I could sense his love. I could understand his heart. When I turned to look at him, I wept. I sobbed like I had never sobbed before in my entire life. All the strength that I had built up over 11 years of military service, all the discipline and control that I had trained myself to maintain, it all broke apart. I was on my knees weeping in front of the Son of God, and I could not stop myself. I wept for all the people I had seen eating the black apple. I wept for all the people who had refused to prepare and refused to believe and who had paid the ultimate price. I wept for all the people suffering with the striped apple. I wept for all the people whose minds had been stolen by the insect-covered apple. And I wept with joy for all the people who had been taken away by the bright apple. Jesus revealed to me what each apple meant. He did not speak in words exactly, but I understood. The knowledge just came to me. It was like he was pouring understanding directly into my spirit. He was not using language as I knew it. He was transferring truth directly into my mind and my heart and my soul. I knew what he wanted me to know. I understood his message completely. The first apple, the black one, represented the coming darkness, the months that were coming for humanity. And he showed me that in the days to come, there would be a lockdown unlike any lockdown that had happened before. It would not be like the lockdowns I had heard about in the past. This lockdown would be caused by something different. It would be caused by a disturbing incident, an event so significant that it would affect the entire world. And specifically, It would affect the nation's light stability. There would be a loss of light. Days of darkness, real darkness that would cover the earth. The power would go out, and it would not come back quickly. The electrical systems that run our world would fail. All of them. The systems that keep hospitals running would fail. The systems that keep water flowing would fail. The systems that keep food safe would fail. The systems that keep transportation moving would fail. Everything that depended on electricity would stop working, and in that darkness people would begin to die. Not all at once, but in great numbers, in their scores, in their hundreds, in their thousands, maybe more. He showed me how people would die in those days of darkness. First, there would be the accidents. The car crashes that would happen because people could not see the roads, the falls downstairs and off ladders and into ditches and off cliffs, the injuries from fire and heat and things that people could not navigate safely in the darkness, the people who would be hurt simply because there was no light to guide them, no electricity to keep them safe. Hospital patients who could not be cared for because there was no power for machines, surgery patients who could not be saved because there were no lights, people who would die from what would have been minor injuries if only they had light, countless deaths from accidents and injuries that darkness would bring. Second, there would be the cold. The heating systems would not work because there would be no electricity. People would freeze in their homes. They would freeze in the streets. The elderly would not survive the cold. The young would not survive. Babies would not survive. Families would die together, huddled together, trying to stay warm. But the cold would be too much. The winter would be deadly. The nights would be deadly. The cold would seep into homes and into bodies and into souls, and people would die from it. Entire families frozen together. Whole communities gone cold. Death by freezing on a scale never before seen in modern times. Third, there would be the sickness and disease that would spread because there was no refrigeration, no way to keep medicine or food safe. People would eat spoiled food because they had no choice. Clean water would become impossible to find. The water systems would not work without electricity. The systems that treated water would fail. The systems that distributed water would fail. Disease would spread like wildfire through the population. Infections would set in from wounds that could not be cleaned. Illnesses would multiply and spread. Hospitals would be overwhelmed and then abandoned because the staff could not help anyone. And people would die from things that could have been easily treated before the darkness came. People would die from diseases that had been nearly eradicated. People would die from infections that would have taken minutes to cure with antibiotics and electricity. These were the three ways that people would die in those days of darkness. Accidents, freezing, disease, and death would come to millions. The black apple represented all of this. The black apple was the symbol of a world without light and without hope. The black apple was the symbol of death and destruction and suffering on a scale never before seen. And he showed me that the people who had eaten the black apple, the people who I had seen vanishing in that field, they were the ones who had not taken the warning seriously. They were the ones who had known that something was coming, who had heard the message, but who had not prepared themselves. They had treated it as normal. They had gone about their lives like nothing was wrong. They had not stored food. They had not stored water. They had not stored blankets or fuel or medicine or anything else that they would need. They had not prepared their homes for darkness. They had not built up their faith or their hope or their community. And when the event happened, when the darkness came, it found them unprepared, and it took them. Jesus revealed to me that when they ate that black apple, when they refused to prepare and refused to believe, they had set their course. Nothing could be done to change their fate. Their decision was their end. It was final. It was absolute. There would be no second chance. There would be no escape. Their refusal to prepare had sealed their doom. But he said that this was only the beginning. This was not the end. This was the start of everything that was coming. After the darkness would come something else. After the death would come judgment. After the black apple would come the striped apple. The second apple, the striped one, represented the persecution that would come after. After the lockdown and the darkness and the death, there would be a time of great persecution. It would be directed toward those who believed in God, toward those who had faith in Jesus, toward those who chose to follow him. It would be a time of testing and trial for believers everywhere. It would be a time when the world would turn against the church. Jesus showed me that this persecution would come in three main ways. First, there would be the violence. People who believed would be hunted. They would be attacked in their homes and in the streets. They would be attacked by mobs and by authorities. Their homes would be broken into. They would be arrested and imprisoned. Some of them would be killed. The violence would be swift and brutal and completely unfair. Believers would be blamed for the darkness. They would be blamed for the collapse of society. They would be hunted down like criminals and like enemies. They would be treated worse than any criminal. They would be treated like they were the cause of all the world's suffering. Second, there would be the separation. Families would be torn apart because some members believed and some did not. Children would be taken from their parents because their parents believed. Parents would be separated from their children. Husbands would be separated from wives. And all of this would be done officially by the government, by the authorities, by the very systems that were supposed to protect people. Families would be destroyed by law. Bonds would be broken by order. Love would be tested to its limit by the power of the state. Children would be raised by those who hated what their parents believed. Third, there would be the starvation and deprivation. Believers would be denied food. They would be denied water. They would be denied shelter. They would be cut off from the systems of survival. They would have to hide. They would have to rely on each other and on God's protection. They would have to depend on secret networks of believers to survive. They would have to give up everything that they owned. They would have to lose their homes and their possessions and their way of life. The people who ate the striped apple, the people in that scene who became weak and sick and suffered before they vanished, they were experiencing this persecution. But there was something important that Jesus showed me. Those people who had been grounded in the Word of God before that persecution came, those people who had studied the Bible and prayed and built their faith on a solid foundation, they would survive. They would be hit by the persecution. They would suffer greatly. But they would not be destroyed. They would endure. Their faith would hold them up even when everything else failed. Their belief would sustain them even when their bodies grew weak. Their hope would keep them alive even when darkness surrounded them. Their love for Jesus would carry them through. I understood then that this was why it was so important to build faith now, while there was still time, while it was still safe, while you could worship freely, while you could read the Bible openly, while you could gather with other believers without fear. Because when the persecution came, a person's faith would either save them or destroy them. Jesus revealed that after this second thing happened, after the persecution, there would be one more event, one final manifestation before the end, one last judgment before everything came to its conclusion. Everything would come to its conclusion very quickly after this. No time would be left. Very little time would remain. The end would come like a thief in the night. He showed me that this would be the moment when the devil would take control of human operations. When Satan would take over the running of the world, he would influence men. He would make them do what he wanted. He would corrupt them and control them and use them for his purposes. And he would assign one man to be the head of everything, one man over all the nations of the world, one man who would tell everyone what to do, one man through whom the devil would work his will. This man would parade himself as the Savior. He would present himself as the one who had the answer to all the problems. He would say that he could save humanity from all the calamity that had fallen on the world. He would say that he was the only one who could bring order and safety and peace to the chaos. He would promise solutions. He would promise hope. He would promise protection and security. And people would believe him because they would be desperate. They would have lost so much in the darkness. They would have suffered so much in the persecution. And this man would offer them a way out. He would offer them comfort and safety and a return to normalcy. Many people would believe him. They would accept his message. They would put their trust in him. And in the space of just 3 days, everyone who accepted his teaching, everyone who believed in him and followed him, would be taken over by him. They would come under his control. But here was the terrible part. They would not know when it happened. They would not realize what had occurred. They would think they had made a choice to believe in him. They would think they had made a free decision. They would think they had chosen wisely. But in fact, they would have surrendered their will. They would have given him control. They would have given him access to their minds and their souls. Jesus showed me that those who accepted this man's message would receive a mark that would control them, a mark that would allow this man to direct their thoughts and their actions. They would not be able to think for themselves anymore. They would be his slaves. They would do what he wanted them to do. They would believe what he wanted them to believe. They would act the way he wanted them to act. And they would not understand what had happened to them. They would not know that they had been enslaved. And I understood that those people were like the people who had eaten the third apple. The apple that was surrounded by insects. The apple that looked good but was corrupted inside. Their minds would be taken. Their free will would be gone. They would be nothing more than puppets controlled by the devil through this one man. Then Jesus showed me the fourth apple again. That bright, shining, glorious apple. That apple that was unlike any of the others. That apple that was full of light and truth and hope. He revealed to me that the people who took that apple, the people who touched it and were instantly taken away, they were the ones who were ready for the rapture. They were the ones who had prepared their hearts. They were the ones who believed and had faith and had built themselves up in the Word of God. They were the ones who had resisted the first three judgments. They had warned others about the darkness coming. They had endured the persecution without losing their faith. They had refused the mark of the beast. They had stayed true to Jesus even when it cost them everything. And when the moment came, when Jesus returned, they would be taken up. They would be raptured away. They would be saved. He showed me that it would happen with a sound, a trumpet blast, a sound so loud and so powerful that it would shake everything, a sound that would reach from heaven to earth, a sound that would announce the return of the King, a sound that would be heard by every ear, and in that moment all those who were ready would be taken, instantly, in the twinkling of an eye. They would be gone, taken up to be with Jesus, and everything else would come to an end. The world as we know it would cease to exist. History would end. Time would stop. And a new age would begin for those who had been faithful. That was when I came back to myself. It was like waking up from a dream, except that it was the opposite. Everything that I had experienced in that place, in that forest with the apples and the scenes and Jesus himself, it was more real than anything else in my life. More real than this world is real. I opened my eyes, and I was in a hospital bed. There were machines hooked up to me. There was an IV in my arm. I was alive. But I was different. I was not the same person who had fallen down those steps. Some part of me was still in that forest. Some part of me was still in the presence of Jesus. The doctors told me that the fall had caused complications with my pregnancy, that I had lost the baby, that I had been dead for several minutes before they were able to revive me, that it was a miracle that I had survived it all. Many women, they said, do not survive what I survived. I had lost my daughter. I found out later that it was a girl. The baby I was carrying was a little girl who I would never meet in this life. And I grieved. I still grieve. I grieve for what I lost. But I also know that she is in heaven. I know that God held her. I know that she is safe. And I know that what I experienced was real. It was not a hallucination from lack of oxygen. It was not my mind making things up as I was dying. It was a true encounter with Jesus Christ. It was a message that he wanted me to deliver. So now I am telling you, I am breaking my silence. I am stepping outside of my military training to be vulnerable and to share something that terrifies me and that I cannot keep inside any longer. Things that Jesus showed me are coming, not might come, not possibly might happen, but they are coming. They are certain. Just like they were certain for Dr. Michael, they are certain for you and for me and for everyone on this earth. The first event, the darkness, could come at any time. It could be months away. It could be years away. But it is coming. And people need to prepare. They need to have food and water and batteries and ways to stay warm. They need to have these things physically. But more than that, they need to prepare their hearts. The second event, the persecution, will follow. And believers need to be ready for that. They need to have their faith built up now so that when it comes, they can endure. They need to know the Bible. They need to have relationships with other believers who will support them. They need to be ready to lose everything, including their lives, rather than deny Jesus. The third event, the mark and the one world leader, will be the final temptation. It will seem like the answer to everything. It will seem like safety and security and stability. But it will be a lie. It will be the deepest deception that has ever been offered to humanity, and those who accept it will lose their souls. The fourth event, the rapture, will be the moment of salvation for those who are ready. But the window is closing. The time to prepare is ending. There is not much time left. I know how this sounds. I know that many people will hear this and think that I am crazy. I know that some people will question whether I really experienced what I say I experienced. Some will say that I was hallucinating. Some will say that I imagined the whole thing. Some will say that I have lost my mind. But I am telling you the truth. Every word of this is true. And I am telling you because I love you, because I don't want you to be one of the people in that field who ate the black apple. I don't want you to be one of the people who refused to prepare and refused to believe, and then found yourself unprepared when the darkness came. I don't want you to be one of the people who took the mark and gave away your soul and your free will to a man who was controlled by the devil himself. I want you to be one of the people who touched the fourth apple. I want you to be one of the people who was ready when Jesus returned. I want you to be one of the people who was raptured away. So please, listen to what I am telling you. Take it seriously. Prepare yourself, both physically and spiritually. Read the Bible. Pray. Build your faith. Get ready, because the time is not far away anymore. The end is coming, and it is coming soon. Jesus loves you. He died for you. He rose from the dead to save you, and He is coming back to take those who are ready to be with Him forever. Be ready. Please be ready. There is no time left to waste.